The Sikh tradition began 500 years ago in the Punjab region of South Asia, now divided between India and Pakistan. This beginning is firmly tied to Nanak, born in 1469 Common Era and referred to as Guru Nanak by his followers. Sikh means disciple, or student, or learner, while Guru in this context means spiritual teacher or spiritual guide. In his lifetime, Nanak composed hundreds of poetic verses containing spiritual and ethical guidance. These were written down and have been reliably preserved, now forming part of the core Sikh sacred text, referred to by followers as the Guru Granth Sahib. The presence of the Guru Granth Sahib in physical form as a handwritten or printed volume creates a sacred space. This may be in a permanent building, a dedicated room in an individual residence, or a room that is temporarily prepared for that role. The building or permanent room is called a Gurdwara, meaning Guru's door, sometimes with the honorific of Sahib added. Sikhs followed a detailed set of protocols with regard to respectful treatment of the Guru Granth Sahib, including its position, typically raised in some way, its protection, and the behavior of those who are in its presence. Sikh worship consists of reciting and singing from the Guru Granth Sahib and saying prayers addressed to a sole, supreme divine being. Gurdwaras serve many roles beyond being sacred spaces, narrowly conceived. This is particularly evident in diasporic locations where Gurdwaras have served as community hubs in multiple social and cultural dimensions, with institutional aspects going beyond the core worship services and langar. This perspective suggests that the term Sikh temple, while used to frame or name Gurdwaras in diasporic contexts, can be somewhat misleading. Ultimately, the broader role of Gurdwaras reflects Sikh tradition, which recognizes that the spiritual and temporal are intertwined, and that seeking the divine truth has to be in the context of living a full life. This video illustrates the multifaceted nature of Gurdwaras in America, beginning with the historic role of Stockton Gurdwara in California, the first Gurdwara in the United States. Brief historical narratives of Gurdwaras in the United States further develop this understanding, including their central role in community formation, a process that has parallels in the early history of the Sikh community in Punjabi Panth, in its Sangats and Dharamsals, a term that predated Gurdwara in Sikh usage. Historically, Sikh migration to the West had its roots in British imperialism. A Sikh kingdom founded by Ranjit Singh in 1799 was finally conquered by the British in 1849 and absorbed into what became a part of the British Empire a few years later. This global imperial structure gave Sikhs an opportunity to travel to different parts of the world within the British Empire, including Canada. Sikhs first entered the northwestern United States via Vancouver in Canada, seeking economic opportunities outside of the British colonial structure. Discrimination, such as the Bellingham riots of 1907 in Washington state, led them to move into California. Other Sikhs entered California at Angel Island in the San Francisco Bay, typically coming via Hong Kong. By 1910, there were a few thousand Sikhs in California, constituting most of the South Asian population of the United States. And by 1912, the first Gurdwara in the United States had been established in Stockton, California, in the San Joaquin Valley, east of San Francisco. One early migrant, Jawala Singh, left Punjab in 1905 and made his way to California via Panama and Mexico, arriving in 1908. There he met Vasakha Singh, who arrived the same year after 9 years working in Shanghai. They became business partners, leasing a 500-acre farm in Holt, a few miles west of Stockton. By 1910, their farm had become the primary hub for Sikh activities in the United States. Sikh laborers worked tirelessly throughout the day, but would often gather in the evening for rehras, evening prayers, and then have discussions about Sikhi, the Panth, or global Sikh community, and their homeland. While celebrating Guru Gobind Singh's Gurpurab, translated literally as Guru's Day, in this case a birth anniversary, at the Hope Farm in December 1910, Vasakha Singh took a vak, that is, a saying of the Guru taken from the Guru Granth Sahib, to establish a Gurdwara. After the Gurdwara was established in 1912, Jawala Singh and Vasakha Singh played important roles in the founding of the Gadar Party, a transnational anti-colonial movement. Stockton Gurdwara served as a core Gadar activist space, to a point where British authorities believed that the religious objectives of Stockton Gurdwara was a ruse to mask its revolutionary intentions. Meanwhile, in December 1913, a California congressman introduced an immigration bill aimed at excluding laborers from the so-called Asiatic region, expanding earlier restrictions aimed at Chinese immigrants. The hearings for this Asiatic exclusion bill began in January 1914, and in February 1914, Stockton Gurdwara funded Dr. Bishan Singh from Stockton and Dr. Sudindra Bose from Iowa to travel to the hearings and advocate for immigration rights. Even before the Stockton Gurdwara was a reality, Jawala Singh and Vasakha Singh had also launched a scholarship to support students from British India to study in the United States. A few years later, the Gurdwara bought a house in downtown Berkeley where students could stay rent-free. Among the students who were supported in this manner was Dalip Singh Sand, who later became the first Asian American member of the US Congress. Stockton Gurdwara also supported various social and political movements in Punjab, including the 1920 formation of the Shromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, which sought to free Punjab's Gurdwaras from corrupt functionaries. Other non-violent actions for that objective, and also some more militant groups that were created in response to violence by these functionaries. The Page Act of 1875 had prohibited entry for Asian women, which separated families and brought bachelors to the United States. Although these Sikh men maintained strong relationships to each other and to the institutions that were formed for Sikhs, such as Stockton Gurdwara, some married Mexican women, which was allowed because both were considered brown. Otherwise, so-called interracial marriages were prohibited by the laws of this time. These marriages and discrimination against turban wearing led to many Sikh men discarding their traditional turbans. New and stricter immigration laws prohibited new immigrants from entering the US, and many earlier immigrants returned to Punjab after several years in the United States. For example, Jawala Singh and Vasakha Singh each separately returned to India to continue the struggle against British colonialism. In California, the children of Punjabi Mexican couples, where almost all the men were Sikhs, were invariably brought up as Catholics and attended church regularly. The Sikh men and sometimes their families would still attend the Stockton Gurdwara on special occasions, despite its distance from the center of this hybrid community, which was in the Imperial Valley, bordering Mexico. In this social and cultural milieu, becoming American began to shape worship practices. In particular, the congregation in Stockton, after the founders were gone, saw and obtained permission from the Shromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee in Punjab to sit on chairs in the Gurdwara and not cover their heads or remove their shoes, similar to Christian church practices. The SGPC gave permission with the provision that the Guru Granth Sahib should still be placed higher than the seated worshippers. One can speculate that the distance and isolation of this congregation played into the decision, along with a desire to help this small, faraway community to make their way in an America that was dominated by a Christian, predominantly white European ethos. In 1947, British India became independent but was split between Pakistan and India. Partition impacted Sikhs as their homeland Punjab was divided and many were forced to migrate out of West Punjab to East Punjab, Delhi, and other parts of India. While Sikhs were negatively impacted by the partition, they sought to establish themselves as citizens of the new country. Meanwhile, Sikhs in the US, who still constituted the great majority of immigrants from India, threw their unwavering support behind the new nation, India. As India built its new identity on the global stage, Stockton Gurdwara became a stop for visiting dignitaries from India. In particular, the Sangat pushed to financially support India during the 1962 India-China conflict. On the other hand, the movement for a Punjabi-speaking state that continued through the 1950s and the early 1960s in the face of resistance from the Indian government drew little attention. Perhaps the personalities of leaders and the ideals associated with them both played a role in this period, especially in the case of shared democratic values. For US Sikhs in particular, the election of Dalip Singh Sand as the first Asian Heritage Member of Congress, where he served from 1957 to 1963, may have played a role in shaping attitudes. Sand toured South and Southeast Asia in his first term in Congress, during which he met with the Indian Prime Minister. For US Sikhs, developments in India at this time were also positive. A Punjabi linguistic state was finally granted in 1966, and the introduction of high-yielding varieties of wheat ushered in a new era of prosperity in Indian Punjab. New immigration after a 1965 reform of the law was another positive development, increasing the US Sikh community's size. The Hart-Celler Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 and the establishment of the Medicare and Medicaid programs had major effects on the history and experiences of Sikhs in the US. The 1960s also saw the height of the US-Soviet space race as part of the ongoing Cold War. Liberalized immigration, government support for healthcare, and the space race brought forth a new wave of Sikh migrants, including engineers, doctors, and nurses who broke through the previous professional barriers. The number of Sikh professionals and graduate students in the United States rapidly increased. New rules for family unification also created a channel for immigrants, and Sikhs were well placed to benefit because of early migration. The influx of Sikh immigrants led to the creation of several new Gurdwaras from the late 1960s to the 1980s in major metropolitan areas. In 1968, Sikh professionals in Northern California gathered in Berkeley to formally establish the first Gurdwara in the San Francisco Bay Area, although acquiring land and constructing a new building in El Sobrante took another decade. Meanwhile, Yuba City, a growing center for Sikh immigrants north of Sacramento, opened its first Gurdwara in 1969. Southern California also saw its first Gurdwara since Imperial Valley's El Centro Sikh Temple in 1948, with the Hollywood Gurdwara in Los Angeles opening in 1969. Just as in the case of Javala Singh and Vasaka Singh, Gurdwaras began within residential spaces, moving to dedicated buildings as money was raised and the Sangat grew. One difference from the earlier period was the presence of Sikh women, who participated in planning and the governance of the new Gurdwaras. New York had its first Gurdwara by 1972, and Chicago in 1979, after groundbreaking in 1976. Major urban areas now typically have several Gurdwaras, as do smaller California cities with concentrated Sikh populations such as Yuba City and Fresno. There are well over 250 Gurdwaras in the United States for a population of roughly 300,000 Sikhs. These Gurdwaras have formed associations such as the American Sikh Council to share resources and to coordinate efforts for education and human rights advocacy. Gurdwaras can also serve as centers for cultural activities, health services, and political debate, including various efforts to benefit Punjab. All of this echoes many of the characteristics of the first Gurdwara in the United States in Stockton. New immigrants quickly argued for and implemented more traditional rules with respect to the conduct of worship in the US Gurdwaras, particularly floor seating, head covering, and removing shoes. Langar practices tended to be more flexible, though later on, Sikh authorities in India pushed for adherence to tradition in seating and dress there as well. However, some US Gurdwaras still lack spaces for traditional langar seating. Increased numbers of immigrants produced greater competition for management of Gurdwaras, but the biggest change came in 1984 after the Indian Army attacked the Harmandir Sahib and Akal Takht Sahib in Amritsar. A decade of violence in Punjab after that attack led to increased migration and to an accumulation of experiences of violence at the hands of authorities in India among those migrants and their relatives. This continuing narrative has been important in reshaping the focus of some US Gurdwaras, particularly those in California whose Sangats have close ties to rural Punjab. Islamophobia following 9/11 and the attack on the Oak Creek, Wisconsin Gurdwara in 2011 by a white supremacist added dimensions of domestic concern for Gurdwaras and their Sangats, while examples of transnational repression returned the focus to the politics of Punjab. What is the big picture behind all these developments? Gurdwaras are arguably the central institution for Sikhs. When Sikhs arrive in the US, they tend to seek out a nearby Gurdwara to build Sangat. If there isn't one nearby, the Sangat establishes one. In diasporic settings, Gurdwaras play an expanded role for the community, providing shelter, guidance, and various services for new immigrants, along with the core role of spiritual fellowship that is part of Sangat. This central role is also being recognized by the naming and renaming of the sites as Gurdwaras rather than temples. Requests to local governments for renaming of roads leading to these sites have also shifted from the label Sikh temple to Gurdwara. While political issues are sometimes salient, especially when they erupt in violence, educational and social services are by far the most important aspect of Gurdwaras and the communities after worship itself. Heritage preservation and the transmission are particularly important. Punjabi language, Sikh history, and Shabd Kirtan, Sikh sacred music, are the most common types of classes in Gurdwara Sunday schools. Some Gurdwaras offer classes in Gatka, a Sikh martial art, or serve as hubs for sports teams or Boy Scout troops. Sometimes they help organize speech, music, and sports competitions and guide students in preparing and applying for college. There are parallels with churches and with other immigrant groups in some of these activities, but also intrinsically Sikh sources of inspiration. Such activities in Punjab or other parts of India might be more independent of Gurdwaras simply because of differences in demographics and in the infrastructure of societal institutions.
And I am a Boy Scout member, and I have been a member of the Scouting organization for almost 6 years.
The long history of Gurdwaras in the US makes them also now part of the history of the Sikh community. Preserving the older physical Gurdwara spaces is crucial to understanding the history of Sikhs in the United States. These sites tell a story of the community and especially its connection to the local. Preserving these sites establishes a sense of permanence and ensures that future generations are able to appreciate the legacy left behind by their predecessors. Visual, written, and other documentary materials, including recordings of oral histories, are also part of this heritage. The Stockton Gurdwara, by far the oldest in the US, forms the basis for an understanding of the Sikh experience in the US and how Gurdwaras are much more than just places of worship. At a time of small numbers, limited technology, and scarce resources, Stockton Gurdwara and its leadership was able to establish scholarships, fund delegations for advocacy, lead a transnational anti-colonial movement, fund girls' schools in Punjab and other philanthropic projects, and provide a starting point and support hub for new immigrants. US immigration laws and transnational history have heavily impacted the experiences of Sikhs in the US, including the operations and functions of Gurdwaras. But Gurdwaras have remained places that serve as community centers as well as actively centering the community. Each Gurdwara in the US shares a basic story of the desire to create Sangat, but each Sangat has a distinct history shaped by time, place, and the people involved. Many of these stories are yet to be told.